We invited Jock and Bryony to further discuss some of their thoughts on good communication between grape growers and winemakers.
So Pepe's, as we saw in the DVD, his behaviour would have irritated most grape growers. Sort of lack of respect in the vineyard, didn't describe the sort of fruit he was looking for, and made generally derogatory comments. For a grape grower that spends an entire year growing a crop, for it to be dismissed as rubbish in such a way would be a very poor step at building good relationships.
Yeah, if I came across someone like Ben in the vineyard, I'd walk away and probably never come back. He showed a great lack of understanding and lack of care for his vineyard. It was difficult to get any answers from him, and he really didn't understand what he was doing or what I was looking for.
In terms of relationships between grape growers and winemakers, I think the ideal relationship is very much an open book approach. Winemakers will know what products they need for a particular vintage. Of course, they're going to need to speculate on some and take chances on some because they can't determine their market. And grape growers, on the other hand, have a fixed crop, but they need to be able to plan a year ahead or perhaps 5 years ahead if that crop will eventually either be required or move across to another crop. So the open approach of communication allows both parties to plan and ultimately have more profitable businesses.
We really are in this together, and we rely on each other going forward to stay in this business. We can't afford to not have the conversations and build those relationships between each other. I can only think that it's really important that whether you're a winemaker or a grower, that you develop your understanding of the other aspect of the industry, and as well embrace the difficulties in selling wine and understanding that.
Sometimes growers don't particularly like being told what to do by potential buyers or winemakers, but the whole relationship has to be based on respect. Growers need to be prepared to grow fruit to specifications. The information needs to come back from buyers and back from the end use, so they can effectively work in partnership. Vineyards become profitable, the winery becomes profitable, and then the relationship becomes a lot stronger over time. Taking into account the supply and demand forces of the industry, even when things are in oversupply or undersupply, the relationship should still be strong because it actually does make both enterprises more profitable. So the ideal thing when you're presenting your fruit for sale is to consider it like you're selling a car. You wouldn't sell your car full of rubbish and unwashed. You'd actually detail it. You'd make it look as good as you possibly could. And you'd communicate what you've done to the vineyard to the potential buyer. And that involves having accurate information, potential picking dates, tonnage, what you expect to do in terms of delivery, to give as much information as possible. And that allows the buyer to plan their vintage and their harvest a lot more. It also makes them consider that you're a professional grape grower. So it's important to know what are some of the particular details about your vineyard are. You know, what's the traditional harvest date, what's the traditional yield, what are the unique characters about the vineyard that allow the potential buyer to make decisions based on that fruit.
I agree. I think it's important to be able to show you have a great understanding of your own vineyard and to convey your passion and interest and understanding. If I walk into a vineyard and someone really doesn't appear to care or know, I'm concerned that maybe the finer details like spray diaries, etc., may not be up to date. If I go into a vineyard, I don't spend my year in the vineyard like the owner of that block does. And they can convey information to me quickly. It gives me a greater understanding of what's happening and what fruit we may be able to harvest from that block.
Simple terminology can quite often be a big issue between grape growers and winemakers, particularly coming up to harvest. Descriptions of grapes, whether they be bagged up, shriveled, flaccid or turgid. This is the sort of terminology that needs to be understood by both parties so that the communication is clear between them. If you don't understand any of the language that's being used, it's very simple to check with your Speaking of Grapes and Wine handbook that's been produced.
It helps me as well in terms of being able to have a common terms of reference when I'm talking to other winemakers. If we're talking about seed ripeness or tannin develop in skins, especially with reds like Shiraz, which is big in this area, and it's great. It really can help you just use the same terminology. So when you're talking to growers, everyone understands, and you get to the same point a lot faster.
From a grower's perspective, they like to plan their year post-harvest for the next vintage. So information from winemakers or potential buyers about the pruning level that they need to set, whether they should then do some shoot thinning, whether they need to remove fruit and select an appropriate crop level. Very important information that a winery can put forward to a grower so that they can plan their year ahead in terms of the way that they're going to grow the fruit.
That can often come out of your post-vintage tastings, holding a tasting with your grower if possible, so they can see the wine that has resulted from their fruit, and you can discuss the quality level, if you're happy with it, whether you'd like to see any changes, or if it fits into the product that you wanted that fruit for, which is always really important. And it gives, I guess it helps to build an understanding for the grower to see where their fruit and what their activities in the vineyard for the previous year or 2 years has done to to the resultant wine qualities. I think it's really important that there's an understanding of the end use for a block of fruit. It would be silly to put all of the input into try and grow A-grade fruit, for example, when your winemaker only wants it for C-grade or for B-grade. And conversely, if the winemaker's looking for A-grade fruit and you're trying to crop up and maximise your tonnes, and you're not too concerned as long as you have a sound, clean block at harvest time, that once again that goes against what the winemaker wants, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone, and that's where respect and relationship, etc., is really important between the grower and winemaker. Jock, I took 2 blocks from you, the top and bottom block this year. I was really happy with the top block and the bottom block. They were both good. I think the top block has got potential to go higher in some sections where there's a bit less crop. The flavour concentration is really interesting. The tannin develop is fantastic. And what I'd like to see is maybe if we can reduce the crop load over the whole block. And I want to talk to you about what we can do for that.
Sure. I understand the bottom block. It's in some deeper soil and it grows very nice fruit. The top block, I think we can get to a higher level. We'll reduce the bud number at pruning. And then as we come into flowering, we'll have a look at some shoot thinning, maybe some of those clumpy areas, particularly around the post. And there's probably the opportunity to just remove some green bunches later on as well. I noticed you picked it up as we walked through the vineyard during harvest, that was something that had an effect.
Look, that'd be great. If we can work on that, then we might be able to get into the reserve label, which I'd really like to do.
So we'd be expecting about 12 tonnes from the top block. Is that too much fruit for your reserve, or is that okay?
No, that should be okay, and that's a good fermenter size for me, so that will work really, really well.
Yep. Okay. The most important thing I think winemakers look for in vineyards is balance. Balance between crop load and canopy, and that's almost irrelevant of the end use. You can have a heavier crop and a healthy canopy as opposed to a lighter crop and a canopy that's going to manage that crop all the way through. So I think vine balance is very important for the entire vineyard. Some of the important things from a grape grower's perspective to get through to a winery is to make sure the estimates are in on time, that the second set of estimates are in on time as well, the spray diaries are completed and returned to the winery. And then coming up to vintage, that the maturity tests that are done in a timely manner and started far enough away from harvest that the winery can actually start to make plans. And then getting closer to harvest, good communication back to the winery so that the growers can organise their picking, so that their transport is organised and the winery knows how the fruit is going to be delivered, whether it's bulk or bins or whichever way. And the other information is very important, is that the grower picks the right amount of tonnes so the winery aren't getting surprises, both low and high.
If you're asked to bring in 12 tonnes, you bring in 12 tonnes. If you think there's going to be a variation on that, if you think you may have more fruit out there, don't just pick it. Speak to the winemaker as quickly as possible, as soon as you realise there's more, to see if they're prepared to take that fruit. There's no point picking that extra fruit to have it rejected at the weighbridge, so you may be able to find a potential buyer for that if it's still fresh and on the vine. I think that's really critical. Jock's touched on it, but it's really important to understand that vintage is a really busy time. People have had too much coffee and not enough sleep. Emotions running really high, and things happen very quickly. Decisions are made. If you have an agreement on a harvest date, you should get it in writing, and you should make sure you understand your additions to the fruit, if there are any, and have this all in writing. The delivery time, agree how the fruit's going to be delivered. Don't deliver fruit in a tip truck if they can't handle tip trucks at the winery. It doesn't do anyone any favours. It can just cause spoiled fruit. So have things in writing, and just understand that there can be a lot of stress at vintage, and everyone's really trying to do the best they can to make the best wine they can and to handle everyone's fruit with in the best way.
Speaking of Grapes and Wine was produced by the McLaren Vale Grape, Wine and Tourism Association. For more information, pick up a copy of the Speaking of Grapes and Wine booklet.